Did you know that you can select which nurses are with your child in NICU? You are going to benefit from my love and friendships with NICU nurses to learn how primary works and how it's going to benefit you and your preemie during their stay in NICU. There's some obvious and not so obvious reasons that it could work or not work for you, so we're going to talk about that. Now, what to consider when selecting a primary nurse and how to ask them or what the processes are to have a primary, we'll cover in another video. If I did both, this would be like an hour-long video. Look in the description box below. You're going to see a link for the second part of this video. If not, it'll say coming soon, but when it's ready, it'll be in the description box below. So let's start with the big disclaimer, and that is that not all NICUs offer primary nurses as an option, or even a favorites list, which is like so stupid. So ask first if they have it. If not, keep watching. Send me their names. Send me whoever runs that spot. I'm gonna go talk to them because we should really advocate for doing that. So you worry about your babies growing and getting strong and getting better and getting close to discharge. I'm gonna fight that battle for you and have some conversations because, hey, hospitals that don't do it, stupid. Primarying is the best thing ever. If you don't know what a primary is, it might seem confusing. What in the world is a primary nurse, and like, why is she so extra about it? I've got reasons. Nurses are assigned 1 to 2 babies during a shift. If you have twins in NICU, the nurses will most likely just have your babies assigned to them, but typically 1 to 3 babies. A primary nurse are nurses that are always assigned to your baby during their shift. If I have a primary nurse for Zach, that nurse is always going to be assigned Zach as one of their babies during their shift. Now, why would you want a primary nurse? Some people feel like, well, duh, of course I would want one. And then some are like, well, I don't know, I've been rocking and rolling so far, it's great. Here are 4 reasons that a primary nurse might make sense for you. Point number 1, a primary nurse is in a position to advocate more effectively than someone who is only seeing your baby a few times in a month, once a month, just a very disconnected experience, right? A primary NICU nurse provides consistent care, it's continuity with them, tracking and charting and monitoring and engaging with your baby. And this allows them to see things that you really would not pick up if you have various kind of disconnected shifts assigned to the baby. What that means is when doctors and nurses are doing their rounds and they're discussing care plans for the day and approaches and directions, that NICU nurse that's selected to be your primary has a tendency to speak up more in those spaces and feel confident when they're challenging some of those directions and approaches that some of the doctors may have. Now, doctors are still going to be doctors, but I'm saying the nurses are around more than the doctors, so they have valuable input to provide. And primary nurses, because they're in that space, tend to be more successful in speaking up and countering. And ultimately, who benefits from that? You and your baby. Point number 2, if you can't be there all the time, a primary nurse in NICU serves to be another consistent voice, another consistent touch, another consistent personality, just a presence that your baby is going to recognize and find comfort in. It's the same hands doing diaper changes, temperature checks, touch times, things like that, right? It's the same voice in the hands doing the same things and giving them passies, and your baby benefits from having that familiar feel. My babies had that mostly from day one. I was very lucky that the people who ended up being our primaries were involved from the very first day. And I benefited a great deal from having primary nurses. Why? I had a toddler at home and I had to work full time. And there were times that having those presents with the primary NICU nurses allowed me to not feel guilty when I had to be sick at home or when my toddler was sick, because our babies were in NICU during winter season. I was comfortable. I knew I had consistent, excellent care with my NICU primary nurses, and I knew that they were going to be an extension of my hands and my eyes and my heart, and I had zero concerns about what was going on with my baby during that time. And that's really, really huge, especially when you have a really good connection with your primary nurse. 3, they advocate for you and your baby in ways you may not realize. They can recommend being moved to a different wing in NICU that can maybe better serve your baby or what's needed for them. They can recommend being placed in a private room if your NICU has private rooms. They can recommend who covers your shifts on the days that they're out, because obviously, like, they need some time off, right? They want to make sure that they find the best fit, the best compatibility for you and your baby. And I feel like this is partially it kind of serves them, but I'm not offended by that at all. Just like when you go on vacation, you don't want to come back and have everything be a mess, right? And so they don't want to come back and see cords organized in a way that like doesn't make sense to them, or have you come back and have you be frustrated because you had a nurse that you didn't really communicate well with. And so they're going to advocate in that space for themselves as an extension of you. But it doesn't really matter because you still benefit from it. So it's a good point. So 4, communication style is consistent. When you meet a new nurse for the first time, you're constantly re-engaging and figuring out their pattern, how they work, what their care preferences are, what their communication styles are, how they prefer to partner with parents. And if you get a different one so frequently, you're constantly hitting that reset button. It's like it's not like you're meeting somebody new for the first time. And it's already stressful when you have just the circumstances of what the NICU is, right? And so to add that layer of complexity of like, here's somebody new I have to get, used to, it just makes it really, really hard. So having that consistency is key. You can build on that partnership. You can play off each other's strengths. It really is great. So you have the what and the why. What about the who and the how? Like, who should I pick to do my primary? How do I get that? Again, we're going to cover all that. We'll be back for part 2.